Sitting on this stage right now is someone, it's hard to think of anyone more deserving of NOW's Women of Vision Award. That's Dr. Heidi Hartmann. Dr. Hartmann, a feminist economist, has dedicated her professional life to documenting the socioeconomic status of women and their families. And through her work and the work of the think tank she founded and heads, that's the Institute for Women's Policy Research, Dr. Hartmann has provided us with a clear vision of a better world for women, women as mothers, women as caregivers, women as students, women as employees, women as low-income workers, women as women of color, and women as women in retirement. This is not to forget her amazing work in documenting the impact on the lives of women of New Orleans surviving the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. Truly, this is an economist with great compassion. Heidi and her staff of economists, sociologists, psychologists, anthropologists, and even a theologian generate top quality, relevant, and influential reports on a wide variety of research topics. These cover the infamous gender pay gap and its effect on women's lifetime earnings, women's employment and unemployment patterns, improving unemployment insurance programs to cover more women workers, education and training needs of women, paid sick and family leave, poverty and welfare policy, and the critical need for women of color and others to build assets and wealth, among many other topics. Heidi's reports are widely read, quoted, commented on, and their data and findings are often incorporated into congressional testimony, federal and state legislation, and forms the basis of public education and advocacy campaigns undertaken by other organizations, just like NOW. A great example of this is the new report called Breaking the Social Security Glass Ceiling, which is in your purple bags. You all have a purple bag, right? All right, good. Have you read the report yet? Get to work. For this, NOW is so fortunate to partner with the Institute for Women's Policy Research and the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare to produce a truly groundbreaking set of proposals to update this vital social insurance program that has dramatically reduced poverty among older women, provided crucial income to workers with disabilities, and families of disabled or deceased workers. Many dozens of other important reports can be found on the IWPR website. Guess what it is? www.iwpr.org. And I should note that this year, the Institute for Women's Policy Research is celebrating its 25th anniversary. We salute, yes. We, the National Organization for Women, salute the work of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Many of the Institute's staff members are with us today, thank you. And especially, we salute Dr. Heidi Hartmann, a truly outstanding feminist and visionary. I present the NOW's Woman of Vision Award to Dr. Heidi Hartmann.
Well, thank you very much. This is indeed an honor to receive this award from the National Organization for Women. It comes at an opportune time in my life, which I will explain. And I want to say that I am a proud member of NOW, and that I've been a member for the last few years, ever since Elizabeth Crum, who worked at IWPR and who is past president of the DC chapter, and I guess now Mid-Atlantic regional leader, recruited me to NOW. So, of course, I've known about NOW all along. Everybody does. I've enjoyed working with NOW, and we've enjoyed co-sponsoring the Caregiving Summit at this conference. You might remember in 2007 in Atlanta, we co-sponsored another conference with NOW and the National Council of Negro Women, another great event. And I've really enjoyed co-chairing the Older Women's Economic Security Task Force with Terry O'Neill. That's the task force of the National Council of Women's Organizations, which is, as you know, our biggest coalition with more than 12 million members. It's really great it's a very productive relationship for a think tank to be able to partner with an activist organization like NOW. And I think Terry and I have made a few things happen that, just might not have happened otherwise. So it's been a lot of fun. So why is this an important award for me right now? Well, in these difficult economic years, since 2007, when the Great Recession started, and when the economics profession, I think, has seriously run amok, and has not provided the guidance our country needs, I have sometimes felt a bit guilty about the malfeasance of my profession of economics, and then questioned whether my vision is sound. Actually, my physical vision has improved since I had cataract surgery. But it's my mental vision and my concept of the future that I would like to see us all move toward. That has been somewhat, I think, the victim of hard knocks in the last few years, when I've actually wondered whether the U.S. has the capacity to move toward a kinder, gentler, and more generous nation that I think all of us in this room would like to see. So let me share a few words about the vision that I have and maybe give you just one more to-do. We've gotten a lot of to-dos during this conference, but I've got one more at the end of my hopefully short remarks. So here's the vision that I have for our country. I would like to see a society in which a mother would not have to be afraid to take her daughter to the dentist for fear of what the bill would be. I would like to see a country where a single mother who is the sole support of her family would not be laid off on Christmas Eve because as a retail worker she had no labor union who either could have prevented the layoff or at least timed it for a more humane evening than Christmas Eve. I'd like to see a country where a single mother has the ability to go to college and better herself, that she would be able to do because our welfare system would support her. She would have child care, she would have a decent standard of living while doing it, her tuition would be paid, and she would be able to go as far as she possibly could with the talent and the ability that she had. Well, you might not be too surprised to know that all of these stories are stories from my childhood, and that mother was my mother. As you may know, I don't usually talk about this stuff very much. But my mom was truly remarkable. Oh, and I should say she's still with us at 94. And despite all the barriers and all the problems my mom had, she worked her butt off and she made sure that I got to college and that I had all the opportunities that she didn't have. And I know that I share that with a tremendous number of women in this room, that all of us probably had an enormous number of opportunities because of our mothers. They fought for us, they supported us. And also our generation, and I was just before the baby boom, we came along at a very lucky time. We came along at the time when the second wave of the women's movement was really coming to the fore and was completing the agenda of the first women's movement, getting us, or trying to get us, equal opportunity in school, equal opportunity in the labor market, closer to equal pay. Divorce laws liberalized, that was very important. Child support enforcement, the strengthening of welfare. For a while there in the 60s and 70s, we did have the strengthening of welfare. We still have some programs in some states where welfare moms can go to college and can get their tuition paid. So we came along at a very lucky time when all these opportunities were being won for us by the women's movement. And so that's been something I guess I would have to thank NOW and all the other women's organizations for.
Props to your mom.
Yeah, and my mom. And so I just wanted to just say this has been also a very inspiring and a very exciting conference for me. I have to say that last session where we heard from young feminists organizing made me feel a lot more secure about our future and a lot more confident that we will get that vision of the future that I laid out, one that is kinder, that is gentler, that is more generous, and in which women do have all the opportunities that that they can use. So I have one more to-do for you. Let me just give you a brief review of the to-dos as I heard them. First, we heard that Eve Ensler tell us that we have to dance on February 14th, 2013 to end violence against women. We heard Bunny Sandler say that we have to keep working on Title IX until we have it in all of our schools at every level. Because we still don't have it yet. We heard the great speakers at the Mother and Caregiving Summit this morning tell us that we need to recognize the value of care, most of which, of course, is done by women, and we have to get it into Social Security and all our other programs. We heard Patricia Ireland say we have to give money and to work to get out the vote and to elect women candidates. We heard our young feminist organizers say that we have to recognize our power and know that we can make a difference. And so I have one more to-do for you, which certainly relates to my life and my mother's life. And that is, we need to strengthen our public sector, our local and state government, and our national government. Women are the majority of government workers, especially at the local level and the state level. And we would even be the majority, I think, at the national level if it hadn't been that for the last few years we've been expanding our military and our homeland security so much. But government is what provides us the services that women rely on. And it's mostly women workers that deliver those services. When you hear public education criticized, when you hear public unions criticized, what you're really hearing is that you're hearing teachers, nurses, home health aides, social workers. You're hearing those people being criticized for working hard every day to take care of the rest of us. When you hear that the government is too big and we have to limit the size of government, that is really an attack on food stamps, on welfare, on unemployment insurance, on Social Security, on Medicaid, and on Medicare. That is an attack on the services and the income supports that women and children need and that women and children rely on. Women are the majority of Democratic voters, not just because of abortion rights, which Democrats are more likely to support abortion rights certainly than Republicans are, and not just because of reproductive health care, but because women need to depend on government services every day. Women depend on our schools, on our public transportation, our hospitals and health care, on Medicaid and Medicare, and on Social Security. These programs consist of our social welfare state, and the Democratic Party is a strong supporter of our public sector. They have tried to expand our social welfare state. In a capitalist system, such as the one we've had in recent years, which you can see is very prone to cycles, the ups are exciting and the downs are devastating. We really need a strong government if we're ever to have justice and fairness, and if we're be able to smooth the effects of capitalism and make it more bearable and more possible for all of us. So while President Obama is often accused of being a socialist, which I don't think he is, and I'm sure he's never been one, he does understand the importance of the social welfare state. And with healthcare reform, he has actually inaugurated, I believe, the first major expansion of our social welfare state that we have seen in many, many years. So, in closing, I want to offer you one more to-do to all the wonderful to-dos that we've heard over the course of this weekend, and that is stand up. Stand up for our women in our public sector. Stand up for public sector labor unions. Stand up for teachers, for our librarians, our nurses, and our social workers. Thank you.
I am very pleased to have the opportunity, the privilege of introducing our president, Terry O'Neill. I am continually amazed at the incredible job she is doing with increasing our fundraising and managing now's finances. Increasing our visibility with press interviews, speeches, and those frequent appearances on MSNBC. And then setting our hair on fire to push the legislators and our allies to see what's important and convince them to go all out on legislation critical to women's lives. Here's Terry.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and whoever found that picture of me. Thank you. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to be able to present
this year's Victoria J. Mastrobuono Award to Dr. Vivian Pinn. The Mastrobuono Award is given each year by the Now Foundation to an individual who has made an exceptional contribution in the field of women's health and women's health research. Victoria Mastrobuono was a longtime Now member. She was a patron of the arts, and women's health was very important to her. When she passed away, she left significant, generous bequests to a number of charitable and nonprofit organizations, and the Now Foundation was one of those organizations. And really to show our gratitude to her and our respect for the legacy that she wanted to leave, to encourage development in advances in women's health and advances in women's rights. We created the Mastrobuono Award. And this year is going to a truly extraordinary trailblazer and leader in women's health and medicine. Among Dr. Vivian Pinn's many firsts, she was the first African American and the only woman in her class to graduate from the University of Virginia School of Medicine in 1967. And in 1982, she became the first African-American woman to chair an academic pathology department in the United States. It was right near here at Howard University College of Medicine. And she just didn't stop there. She has never stopped. As the first full-time director of the Office of Research on Women's Health at the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Pinn dedicated 2 decades to ensuring that women's health was a high priority at NIH, and that had not been the case before Dr. Pinn got there. It's fair to say, really, that Dr. Pinn transformed American medicine for women. She pushed relentlessly for more research on women's health. From her office, she was very much responsible for research into breast cancer genes so that we could find a cure for breast cancer in this country. And you know, when she took office at NIH, it was not a smooth path for her. She faced quite a bit of opposition. Okay. But I think the opposition was really part of because of her method. Get a little bit more money here, put a little bit more money there. Get some more money for this research, put money for study on not just breast cancer, but women's research, heart disease. And she also was the first person to get the National Academy of Health to produce the first ever study of lesbian health issues. Without Dr. Pinn, we today would not have the advances that we've made in eliminating gender, racial, and ethnic disparities in medical research and healthcare policy. She put all of that on the national agenda. And for that and many more reasons, I can think of no other professional woman more worthy than Dr. Pinn to receive this year's Now Foundation Victoria J. Mastrobuono Women's Health Award. Dr. Pinn.
Thank you so much. I am truly honored as I look at the program and all of those who have spoken and been part of this meeting, and I apologize I was not here earlier. I just got back from Orlando where I was part of another group of women looking at women's health and talking about where we're going. But I am so proud that you have thought to honor me with the Victoria Mastrobuono Award, make sure I pronounce it correctly, because that means so much. I was thinking back to when I did go to NIH. You know, that was a new office, and I happened to be at a meeting at NIH when Dr. Bernadine Healy, who was the first, and in fact the only woman to serve as the director of the NIH, we've not had one before or since, and they just happened to be presenting at this meeting about this new office they were setting up and what they expected this office to do. And if I had remained quiet and shy like I usually am, I would probably still be in the pathology lab somewhere. But I put my hand up and said, you know, I think this office needs to do more than just address inclusion of women. It needs to look at health. It needs to look at diversity issues. It needs to address careers for women. And I hope you'll consider that as you move the office forward. And following that, I mean, if I just kept quiet, who knows where the office would have gone or how it would have developed under someone else. But I got a call from Bernadine Healy's office saying she wanted to meet with me on the following Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. And I said, well, you know, this is the director of NIH, but I have a lecture to give at medical school. So that's the only time she has, and she wants you there. So I said, okay. So I cut my lecture short, went out there thinking she'd offer me a sabbatical, and she said, Vivian, we heard you make some comments. We think you'd be good to head up this new office. Now, I happened to have taught her when she was a Harvard medical student, and I was a resident, so I'd known her when she was a student behind me. And my response was, I don't think I can take this job because I like to say what I think. And I don't think I will last in government if I take this job because I will have to be able to express what I think when I do. And I really felt that way. So, you know, am I going to give up a full professorship and a department chairmanship, especially since the day that I was told I'd have a residency in pathology, one of the men said to me, Vivian, I hear you're going to join us in pathology. And I'm just a senior medical student. I haven't even finished medical school. But he is so wise to tell me that women never become chairs of pathology, so he just wanted me to know that right on that first day. So I finally made it as a department chair. He didn't survive, I did, but and so I said, am I going to give all this up to go in where, because I had this impression that people in government had to say what they were told to say, and she said, why don't you come try it? And I did, and at first I thought, well, I'm young enough. If they don't like what I say, they can fire me, I'll get a job. And then after about 10, 15 years, I thought, well, I'm old enough. Somebody will take care of it. They don't like it. And here I am 20 years later when I retired on my own. So I did last 20 years. And it was one of the most amazing experiences, really just by providence. I happened to be in that meeting. I happened to be invited to come consider that position. Having been one of the early women in medicine, and you know many, and I'm sure there are others in this room, when there were not many women in medicine, reflecting back, I think we all could go back and think about our family experiences. And I remember when I was a sophomore in college going with my mother to a physician because she had this pain in her hip, and hearing this man speak down to her and say, Francina, if you just wore those shoes I told you to wear and did your exercises, you wouldn't have this pain. And I sat there in horror thinking, how can he talk to my mother, who was a very gentle woman, this way? And of course it was shortly after that we discovered the bone cancer that he had completely missed, not diagnosed, while he's treating her for her posture and giving her gold shots that led to her premature death just shortly after that when I was very young. That really gave me the determination to, one, want to make sure that research addressed issues that affected women's health or our family's health, and that physicians and caregivers in the medical field listen to what women had to say and not just presume that they are all-knowing, but to actually hear what someone, especially a woman, has to say about her health, because we do know our bodies, as it took our bodies ourselves to really get that concept across later. And that I wanted to dedicate my life to making a difference through research and through making a difference for the health of everyone. And so, with that in mind, I was delighted to have that opportunity. I'm not supposed to give a long speech, so let me just jump forward when I reflect back and think. The office was originally set up because of the efforts of grassroots organizations and women. And I use that to this day to point out how the concerns of individual women, grassroots women. You don't have to have multiple degrees. If you have them, great. If you don't, but having that reserve and having that strength and that backbone to speak up for what you know we need and what you know is right can bring about a difference. Those women who were concerned that women were not included in clinical studies funded by the federal government brought about not only the establishment of an office, but offices and new attention to women's health. We've had many women's health movements, but this was the first time the federal government was really paying attention, giving it credibility by putting funds in and an office and support and recognizing it, but also recognizing that we need to go, but also bringing about actually changes in federal law, because actually after the office was established and members of Congress had made sure that NIH was addressing women in clinical studies, the Congress passed a law under the leadership of the Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues. And as far as I have been able to determine, we are the only nation in the world where there is a law that requires the inclusion of women and the inclusion of minorities in clinical research funded by the federal government, by the NIH. That shows how far you can go with individual and group and collective efforts. And my thought was, okay, we're supposed to be addressing the inclusion of women in clinical studies, but we don't want this to just be a politically correct effort, because if you just say put women in clinical studies willy-nilly, how do you justify that to the scientific community, which is the community that I had to convince that this was a legitimate effort? And so we then realized that part of our mission would have to be determining what are research priorities, what do we need to know about women's health, and to get away from that concept of women only being sexual beings and that our health only meant between puberty and menopause, and forget us if we're after menopause. And the book published during my senior year in medical school that essentially said this obstetrician had found the way to cure what was a prevalent hormone deficiency disease, menopause, and totally prevent it. Like, the only way I know to prevent menopause is not live that long. So, you know, so we really have an education to do of the medical community as well as women themselves to realize that no longer hit menopause, we take a rocking chair on the front porch. We were going to be active and continue. And then most of all, that if we're going to be studying women and studying about women, women need to be playing a role in this effort. So we needed to make it another part of our mission to address careers for women in biomedical careers, not just to enter, because we've seen an increase in women going into fields of healthcare and research, but we still have not reached equity in the leadership, decision-making positions. And I was really pleased to see your quote with photo in the Washington Post making that same statement, because we don't want to just be there part of the crowd. We want to be there giving our leadership, which is why I think it's so great you recognize Sandra Fluke, that whole example. Just think, 20 years we've been working on this, and then to think in 2012 there can be a high-level body discussing a women's health issue without women there to speak for themselves and about what they know. So I really have considered the last 20 years to have been an honor and a privilege for me, because I have been doing this on my own time, and then to all of a sudden be in a position where I was able to lead these efforts. But it was not a personal accomplishment. From the day I went into that office and I was visited by leaders in women's health, leaders in women's issues, who essentially said to me, you know, you better do a good job in here, because we're not going to get this chance again. And you better recognize all of your constituents. You better recognize, and we're talking about women's health, we're talking about women's health of all women and their families, because when we talk about women's health, we're talking about taking care of the men, the kids, our elderly, whatever. But I was given enough warning, and I'm smart enough to know not to go against those who are supporting me and who got me there. And by me, I mean this effort to move women's health and women's health careers forward. And I have to say, Janet Canterbury has been there. She's been another one of those that I knew I had to answer to if I didn't do what we needed to do. And And I still look back and I often tell people about the day that she came and brought Patricia Ireland to my office, and I'm going, can you believe Patricia Ireland came to visit me? And I was just so thrilled. But I didn't forget it because I took that as another measure of support from this organization and from women that I respect. So now that I have retired officially, I still haven't moved out of my office after 9 months, but that I'm doing next week. But now that I'm officially retired, I realized that I can say what I want to say, but then I thought about it and realized I never stopped saying what I wanted to say. I just learned how to say it a little bit differently. And now I don't have to worry about that so much because I can go back to saying what I wanted to say, how I would have said it 20 years ago. But with that, I just think we all need to continue to pay attention because even though we've made progress, it is obvious there is still more progress needed. And we can only accomplish that if we each stand tall, if we are informed, and if we inform, and if we stand strong. We will not go back to the ages where women were seen only as those who needed to be preserved for the benefit of sexual attention, shall I say, to put it nicely. I'm still trying to learn how to word things appropriately. So I am really honored that you would give me this award following Nancy Klimas and the Boston Women's Health Book Collective, both of whom I work with and whom I respect so much. And I thank you. Thank you for this award, and thank you for all you are doing to further not just the health, but the lives and fulfillment of all women across this country and around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pinn and Heidi Hartmann, for your extraordinary leadership. And I have a lot of thank yous to deliver today. I want to thank everyone in this room for coming to this conference. This could not be a more important time for women's rights activists to come together. We really are at a watershed moment, I think, in the history of this country. And I am so grateful to every single one of you for being here to think through and work through what it is we're going to do to stop this war on women. I want to thank my vice presidents, Bonnie Grabenhofer and Erin Matson and Alendra Letson. Erin and Alendra, I don't know if you're here. Maybe they're probably out putting out fires as we speak. For your tireless work to move the organization forward, to move the movement forward, and not just to defend against the attacks that are coming at us, and they are coming at us fast and hard, but also to find a way for a proactive women's rights agenda that we can go forward with. I also want to thank all of the board members of the National Organization for Women, Jaron Arifa, Gina Austin Fresh, Linda Berg, Gabe Brune, Rosella Canty-Letzum, Elizabeth Crum, China Fortson, Gordy Gustafson, Diana Herrera, Joycelyn Morris, Christina Mullinax, Sheila Auger, Marcia Pappas, Shirley Ann Rawls, Janice Rocco, Kathy Sloan, Donna Sludiak, Jenny Smith, Jackie Steingold, David Stewart, Jan Strout, Kristen Tigan, Tony Van Pelt, and Mona Lisa Wallace. And it's a long list. We have a very large board. But every single one of those board members has worked with me personally in one way or another to help this organization move forward. And I can't tell you how grateful I am. And I also want to thank NOW's advisory committee, led by Dr. Janet Canterbury, Ambassador Carol Mosley Braun, Patricia Ireland, and Eleanor Smeal. The advisory committee has been been busy this year with, as I'm sure you all know, the modernization of Now's structure project, which is extremely important. We must move this organization into the 21st century to seize the opportunities that this century provides for us, which are very different from those that did face us in the 20th century, and also to fight the threats that we face in the 21st century, which are going to be very different from what we saw in the 20th century. So thank you to the advisory committee for all your real energy and work on that issue. Yesterday and today, we have heard from some absolutely remarkable women. Some of them have spent the past 2 decades, or 3, sometimes 4 decades, at the forefront of the struggle for equality. Some of the women we've seen are in their 20s and just now embarking on their own journey, demanding and achieving freedom and justice for all women and girls. But the one thing that all of these women and all of the people in this room, all of the women in this room, all women in the country really, across all of our differences of age and race and sexual orientation, ability, economic status, immigrant status, the thing that all of us have in common is that today we really are facing an unprecedented war on women. Now we know what that war is all about, and I'm not going to go into detail. We've had 2 solid days of learning all about the details of this war on women. It's a war on our reproductive rights. It's a war on our economic security. It's a war on our personal safety. But what I want to talk about is what we're going to do about it. So we know that wars are won by the right combination of a good offense as well as a good defense. And I will tell you that over the past 12 to 18 months, we have played defense, and we've had some really remarkable successes. Last year, when conservatives tried to cut Social Security benefits under the guise of lowering the federal deficit, Now and its allies, including Heidi Hartmann, worked tirelessly, sometimes feverishly, to make the case that Social Security has nothing to do with the federal deficit, has nothing to do with the federal budget, and although Social Security does need to be improved, the federal budget cannot be balanced on the backs of the millions of women who rely on Social Security, often as their only source of income in their retirement years. And you know, it was remarkable because against huge odds and huge obstacles, we stopped cuts to Social Security last year. Now, having scored that defensive victory, we are now being proactive. We're developing a campaign in partnership with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare and the Institute for Women's Policy Research to improve Social Security benefits for women. For example, Social Security needs to begin providing a caregiver credit. So the women who stay home to care for their children or for their elderly or ill relatives don't have to face lower Social Security benefits as a result. We want to ensure that same-sex spouses and domestic partners are treated exactly the same as heterosexual spouses under Social Security. We need to increase the basic minimum benefit under Social Security for those who have worked a lifetime at particularly low wages, very disproportionately women, and very disproportionately women of color. We need to increase that minimum benefit. In other words, we cannot simply be satisfied with the success we had on defense last year in preventing them from cutting Social Security. We're going on the offense for the future. We're going to improve Social Security for all women in this country, and we're going to do it starting now. And we've had other successes playing defense. When the state of Mississippi, right-wing forces, proposed a personhood amendment ballot measure, which would have amended the state constitution to provide that a fertilized egg is a human being. Right? criminalizing all abortion, criminalizing some of the most popular forms of contraception, outlawing probably stem cell research and in vitro fertilization and other reproductive health technologies. When that threat arose, NOW and its allies throughout Mississippi, and very definitely including NOW's grassroots network throughout Mississippi, we mobilized. In just about every county in the state, we were mobilizing. We defeated that shameful amendment by a vote of nearly 2-to-1 in the end. You know, we just did it again in North Dakota, where we defeated a ballot initiative that would have changed the Constitution in North Dakota to provide so-called religious freedom. It would have allowed anyone to take any action or to refuse to take any action based on their religious freedom. I mean, think what that means. It was actually aimed at employers being able to not provide birth control to their employees. But it was phrased so broadly that it could mean just about anything to anyone. We defeated that one by a vote of 64% to 35%. And it's remarkable, it was North Dakota. So sometimes playing defense can also be fun. Last year, about 6 feminist state legislators filed laws to restrict access to reproductive services for men. For example, one of these laws would require, prior to receiving a prescription for erectile dysfunction medication, like Viagra, that a man would have to undergo a digital rectal exam. And a heart stress test, because, you know, we care about his health and we don't want him to have that heart attack. And it would have required an affidavit from his sexual partner confirming that, yes, indeed, he does need that medication. Another of those laws required that a man watch a graphic video showing the medical risks involved in taking this kind of medication, and that before he should have a 24-hour waiting period between getting the prescription and taking the medication, during which time he would have to undergo at least one counseling session in which he would consider the benefits of a celibate lifestyle. As Eve Ensler said yesterday, we are fucking funny. So we've had a good defense, and we actually had a remarkably good year considering what we were facing last year on defense. We stopped some of the worst excesses of the right-wing extremists who flooded into office, both at the state and the federal levels, after the disastrous elections of 2010. But now we have to take a good offense. We must go on, we must mobilize to throw these extremists out of office and replace them with feminists who will stand up for women's rights. And we know we can do this. I know we can do this. I got 3 reasons to tell you why we are so going to do this. First, we have some great candidates. We've got Tammy Baldwin running for the Senate from Wisconsin. If she wins, she would be the first out-lesbian United States Senator in the history of this country. We've got Elizabeth Warren, who stood up to the bullies on Wall Street. And she'll be standing up to those bullies every day for us in the United States Senate. We've got Lois Frankel, who founded a NOW chapter in Florida, who will be there for us every step of the way. We've got Tammy Duckworth in Illinois, who also is going to be with us every day fighting for our rights. And yes, we are going to re-elect President Barack Obama. And you know, this is something that is not well known. I just learned it actually at the NOW conference. For the first time, there are so many women running for the U.S. House of Representatives that it's entirely possible that women may make up a majority of the freshman class of the 113th Congress. We can win this thing. The second reason I know that we can win this thing is that women all over the country are mobilizing like they have not mobilized in a very long time. Remember when the state of Virginia, the legislators in the House of Delegates in Virginia wanted to pass a mandatory ultrasound law that effectively required a woman to undergo a transvaginal ultrasound probe before she could have an abortion. Right? Now, the FBI just redefined rape. And the new definition of rape under the FBI is penetration, however slight, without consent. Penetration without consent. That is exactly what that transvaginal ultrasound bill required. It was state-sanctioned rape. And the thing that was amazing, people noticed. All around the country, you start seeing it was on CNN, it was on MSNBC, it was in the newspapers, and people started saying, what in the world is going on down in Virginia? Not only did this get a lot of visibility, but one day, thanks to the extraordinary organizing of women, not only women in now, but women throughout the women's movement in the state of Virginia, the day that the legislators were going to go into the House of Delegates and vote on this bill, 1,500 women lined the sidewalk and formed a gauntlet that the legislators had to walk past, standing arm in arm, silent, in a silent vigil, watching them walk through. That is a mobilization that was practically overnight, fueled by social media and fueled by passion and outrage at these extremists who are overreaching like I have never seen it at any time in my life. Another mobilization that we did when Lisa Brown stood on the floor of the House of Representatives in Michigan, objecting to yet another anti-reproductive rights bill, and at the end of her remarks, what she said was, and Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad that everybody is so interested in my vagina, but no means no. And Lisa Brown was censured by the Speaker of the House, told that her verbiage was inappropriate, that the use of the word vagina was a bad thing to do on the floor of the House of Representatives of Michigan. It wasn't 2 weeks later, 5,000 people showed up, 5,000 women showed up on the steps of the Capitol of Michigan to say, vagina! And Eve Ensler joined them to claim the word vagina, to explain to these legislators that if you can't say it, you have no business regulating it. Yeah, women are paying attention. The gender gap is large and growing larger every week, and it's getting larger because the mask has been ripped away from the extremists. And women are seeing in all of its raw ugliness the real agenda that right-wing extremists have in store for us, what they intend to do. The mask has been ripped away. Women and men are horrified, and people are mobilizing. The third reason I know we can win this fight is because we are all going to have each other's backs. Right across differences of age, of race, disability, economic status, sexual orientation, immigration status, we are sisters who will be there for one another. We will not leave our sisters behind. We will not allow the dark forces to divide us against each other. Let me just give you an example. example of how this effort is being made to divide women against each other, and that is the shenanigans that are going on right now today on the Violence Against Women Act. Now, the Senate passed a reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act that we supported. It was not perfect. It was itself a compromise. It consolidates programs in order to save money. Right? But one thing that the Senate bill did, and one of the main reasons that we supported it, is that it expanded services to underserved populations. It in fact identified underserved populations. LGBT survivors who report that they can't access services at a rate of 80%. 80% of LGBT survivors say they're not accessing services, as compared with 20 to 30% in the heterosexual community saying they can't access services. Now, the inability to get to services is a real demonstration of how the Violence Against Women Act has never been adequately funded. Right? But that disparity is jaw-dropping and wrong, and the Senate version of the VAWA reauthorization addresses that disparity, and that's one of the reasons we supported it. Women on tribal lands, where sexual assault and domestic violence are rampant because tribal authorities don't have jurisdiction over non-tribal members who commit crimes of violence on tribal land. The Senate version of the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization addresses this problem, and that's another reason we supported it. Women of color who need and deserve culturally specific services that take into account the realities of their communities and their resources and their families. They need those provisions, and those provisions are in the Senate version of the Violence Against Women Act, and that's another reason we supported it. Immigrant women, who if their abuser is their immigration sponsor, they need to be able to continue their immigration process and push the paperwork through without relying on that abusive sponsor. They need to be able to access permissions to stay in this country while they make that transition. They need to be able to self-petition, is what it's called, so that they can push forward with their paperwork without relying on this abusive sponsor. They need U visas. Those are visas that allow victims of crime to stay in this country while they are cooperating with law enforcement authorities to hold the perpetrator accountable for his crime of violence. Immigrant women need these things, and that is in the Senate bill, and that's another reason why we're supporting it. And women on college campuses who deserve better reporting and better services for sexual assault on campus. Those provisions are in the Senate bill, and we intend to keep them there. But right now, as I speak, Republican leaders, John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, are doing everything they can to prevent us from achieving an inclusive VAWA. They want to turn their backs on these inconvenient victims. These women that they say don't really deserve VAWA services. We will not let our sisters down. We will fight side by side with our sisters, all of us, across all of our differences. We will be there for one another.